This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
I just received a letter from a student who thanked me for instilling the love of math in him. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a very special welcome to Colonel Steve Flaherty, Superintendent of the Virginia State Police since 2003.
2003,
yes. Yeah. And really began your career in State Police much earlier in 1975.
A few years ago, yes.
And reading on the site, you moved up through several different divisions in State Police and then appointed by Governor Warner and continued through the administration since then as Superintendent of State Police. You and I talked some time ago, and I said I need to get you on the show, and for lots of reasons, but one of them, and this whole environment that we're in right now, we need to hear from our superintendent about this environment that we're in, an environment of shootings, of crime, and of police being under assault.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Dave.
Yes.
It's my pleasure. It's been a while since we've been here, but it's really a unique environment we're in today. This post-Ferguson and other high-profile cases in our country, law enforcement in some cases have not acted appropriately, and that needs to be corrected, no doubt. But there are other matters that are kind of laid at the feet of law enforcement that typically maybe someone else could better serve. Of course, a lot of the problems today are because of social economic sorts of environments that people are in, and then of course the mental health issues that quite frequently law enforcement are called in when a behavioral sort of situation becomes worse, and oftentimes there's some violence or firearms or other weapons involved, and that's a really tough situation for these young men and women today that are in law enforcement. The things that we are doing in this new environment, of course, President Obama commissioned the 21st Century Policing Task Force on the heels of Ferguson. And a lot of agencies in the state police, no different, are taking that document and we're really doing a deep dive to try and get a handle on where we stand. And right now, we feel like the state police, we do a pretty good job on most of those matters. But we've got a group of folks. Our current Deputy Superintendent, Tracy Rosillo, is chairing a committee, and within that report, there's 6 pillars. And they range from building trust and legitimacy all the way to officer wellness and officer safety and pretty much everything in between. We've got groups concentrating on each of those 6 pillars and comparing, reassessing what our policies are, processes, procedures, and see what changes we need to make as an organization, philosophically and from a policy perspective. So it's a deep dive. It's an exciting time on one hand, because really on a national level, we haven't seen this take place since back in the mid-'60s. And on a national level, we've been asking for it the last 20 years to do a dive into not just policing, but the whole criminal justice system to see what needs to change in today's environment.
And somewhat related to that, you serve on the board of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and I suppose that includes not just state police, but includes other chiefs of police.
Yeah, there are 13 members of the board, and you probably have seen our last two presidents, Rich Berry from Florida and Terry Cunningham from Massachusetts, now have been the national voice for law enforcement.
Right.
Both made presentations to the president's task force moving along. There are 13 members on the board. My position on the board, I serve as chairman of the state and provincial division, so all the highway patrols, state police, provincial police in Canada, Puerto Rican National Police. We meet periodically and discuss matters of mutual interest. I mentioned Deputy Superintendent Rosillo. She serves on the IACP Policy Advisory Committee. So one of the things the International Association of Chiefs of Police does is create model policies that for agencies across the country, across the world. There's 127 countries now that are represented in the IACP. So we're proud to have that international foothold.
Now, there have been some surveys that you've been doing, and I think VCU's been doing too. Are those kind of fitting into that?
Yeah,
study?
When we talk about what the environment is today, we see what's on social media, and we see what the media is reporting in the 24-hour news cycle, and some of these high-profile cases that I mentioned. Since 2002, as part of our performance management processes, we've been surveying the public that we come in contact with during the course of a year. And we have historically scored in an 80 percentile of people that give us favorable ratings across a litany of different questions that we ask about our services. The most recent one was done in the fall, at a time when we were kind of at the peak of all this discussion about police and policing. And our overall rating was 89.1%. People giving us ratings of excellent or very good. And in terms of fairness, our people were rated at 93.3%. So we were very excited that we got those ratings, but still we need to capture and continue to work toward improving our relations in those communities that feel a little bit differently about police and policing. The VCU study, Dr. McDougall did, and her study reflected similar results, and hers covered all policing in Virginia. They're also near the 80 percentile in terms of services rendered. So it's good for law enforcement in Virginia, even though we still have work to do.
Now, going back to the task force for just a minute, in all of your years working around the Capitol here in Richmond and your involvement, we've all seen task forces that met for a short time, submitted a report, it was over. Is this a task force that you see is going to be ongoing, and it's continuing to see what could be done to improve the environment, the safety for all people?
Yeah, we're hoping that that's the case, and again, that's one of the pushes that the IACP is making. There had been legislation actually that Senator Jim Webb introduced when he was still in Washington to create a commission prior to the President's task force, and what we hope will happen is that this grows into a larger commission where we really do get a top-to-bottom look at the whole system.
Yes, that would be extremely helpful, because governors, presidents all come and go, and sometimes things get continued, and sometimes they don't. They don't. And another thing I wanted to get you to just say another word about, it appears to me, from what I've seen and heard and even conversing with you, that people in law enforcement today have to be somewhat social workers at times. I mean, not with a degree in social work, but are required to have some of those skills that possibly way back when in '75 that wasn't so much a part of what.
That's exactly right, David. We're one of the few professions that has to interact successfully with every segment of our population, regardless of what their particular situation is. And it takes comprehensive training and experience to be able to work in those environments successfully. So it's a tremendous challenge for these young men and women. And our training now, the school that just started for us last Thursday, we've revamped our training processes to try and incorporate more of that type of training.
And that, thinking about the schools, that leads right into the pressing issue of staff, of manpower, men and women that you have
Exactly.
serving. And in my times around the Capitol, I've always heard that whenever they were able to add some more money for some more, that you still were way behind.
That's true. That's true. We for several years now have been working to try and increase our numbers. We are woefully short in terms of sworn employees. There's 37 jurisdictions in Virginia where we don't have anyone out after midnight. In today's
37?
environment, 37
Oh.
different jurisdictions. So, that's one aspect of it. We cover significant geography. The world today is much smaller than it used to be.
Yes.
And anything that happens anywhere in the world affects us. And we used to joke that it was one riot, one trooper, one case, one agent, and that's not the case anymore. Several high-profile cases that you're probably familiar with. The Miss Lovell that was abducted in the Blacksburg area and killed. That was Blacksburg Police Department's case, but the state police assisted, and we had 70 people assigned to that case, one shape or the other, when Reserve Captain Kevin Quick was killed in Waynesboro. We had 4 of our 7 field officers involved in that case. Technology was a significant part of that. We pulled a basic school out to help search 495 for the weapon that was dismantled and thrown out. We served 200 search warrants over about 10 days. So today it's more of an enterprise-wide response when we have a significant case, or even just a minor case. It's no longer one agent or one trooper. It'll be people from different disciplines within the department, intelligence agents, high-tech crime agents, as every case involves some sort of technology today.
And the working with local law enforcement, again, if you would reflect back, because from the 70s and 80s on up to now, has there always been strong cooperation, or is it technology? We were talking about cell phones and matters such as that. Has technology helped in any way for local and regional state people to be working together?
Yeah, well, we've been blessed in Virginia, and I'll say this to anybody that'll stand still long enough to listen, that the relationship among the sheriffs and the chiefs and the state police and our federal partners is probably better here than it is anywhere. I've traveled around a bit and seen just that. I'm always happy to come back home.
Yes.
While maybe there's a cousin every once in a while we don't invite to the reunion, but the fact of the matter
Right.
is that the cooperation is as good as it can be. Technology is something that we all struggle with because we need to have the best that there is, and government it's a little tough for us to stay at the cutting edge because the processes that we have to go through by the time you identify technology and you purchase it, then there's a newer, later, greater thing
Right.
that's
Yes.
come along. But we have some technological tools that we share with our local partners, and we're called on to help them from time to time. And when we see a situation where we feel like maybe we can bring something else to the table, we'll call them and say, well, we have this that may help you in this particular case. But we have wonderful relationships and work together every day. We're part of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces. There's 4 of them across the state that do significant investigations involving various potential terrorism and other high-level crimes across Virginia.
Something that wasn't in existence when you and I were in college, or certainly even in elementary school, but whether they're resource officers or by whatever name, or campus police. So I think of small town Bluefield, where I went to some college, and I think of New York City. I don't know that there were any campus police at that time, but that's another whole level of policing.
Absolutely, and you talk about resource officers. You know, that's probably one of the better things we've been able to do over time as a police community. When I was a baby trooper, you know, we spent a lot of time in schools doing presentations, and our people do today. When I was a captain over in our safety division, we started a program with the Department of Education, and would put a trooper in the school district, and most every time the principal would say, well, I'm not sure I need this. And by the end of the school year, they'd come back and say, we want them back next year because of the interaction with the students. It was good for us, for the students to see really what was in our heart,
right,
and who we really were, rather than, you know, the contact over a speeding ticket or traffic stop. It's not always pleasant for the person who stopped.
You know, thinking about how things have changed, I think from talking with you, it's probably been about 20 years since you really had generalists,
right,
that were trained. So even in the schools and people coming in, tell our viewers more about that.
Yeah, we really haven't since 1997 gotten any positions for generalist troopers or generalist investigators. Most all of the opportunities that we've had to increase our numbers have come with special duties. Sex offender registry unit that we created, and we have 45 troopers and 43 civilians that follow up and manage the sex offender program in Virginia, and our gang units, our fusion center, and all of these specialists. Very important work that we're doing and that they do, but you know, the generalists on the road, there's not many more, if any more, troopers on the road today, or special agents just to do generalist sort of work than we had in 1997, and that's something that we really need to work hard on today, is determine a way that we can get some direct funding so that we can move up incrementally and increase those numbers to do the work that we're called on to do today.
Yeah, talk a little bit about the numbers, because you have a school going on now, and school has started back both at all levels, and people think about semesters or terms. So what's the length of some of that schooling, and how many do you have, and how many more do you need?
Well, we've currently got 2 schools in session. One will graduate November 4th. There are 46 students right now. That's a small group for us. We've been trying over recent years to graduate around 80 if we can. It's 124th basic session. I was in the 61st, so we've been blessed in the last 40 plus years to run that number of schools, but we really do need more. 125th started Thursday. There are still 62 in that class. They'll graduate in March. We're hoping to start another school in the spring. Currently, there are 142 vacancies in the field. Now, those 2 schools will fill part of those vacancies, but certainly by the time those 2 graduate, there'll be more attrition. With the news that we just got last week about the budget reduction that we'll undergo, it's going to be tough to run those schools. Of course, pay raises fell by the wayside for state employees, so that impacts our recruiting. That impacts persons' decisions about, well, do I retire now or do I wait 2 or 3 years? So we anticipate that there'll be some even greater increase in our attrition because of that news.
We probably have some people watching who have a child or grandchild, or maybe that person's watching for himself or herself and saying, I might be interested in that. Is there so tell us then about what's the process that someone goes through to be admitted to the school?
Yeah. Well, we encourage, first of all, reach out to our recruiters. We've got a very robust recruiting program. First Sergeant Marilyn Wilson runs that program. They do a lot of presentations. They visit colleges, they visit high schools, they visit various organizations, and they would love to talk with anyone that's interested. We're running open application processes, 21 years of age. We prefer some college, but it's not an absolute. military people with military background. We welcome you. So please reach out if you have any interest in being involved in law enforcement, and talk to our recruiters.
You know, that message, and maybe our viewers have already seen it. If so, they ought to take another look at it. That about more than just a uniform.
More than just a uniform.
That's part of that message that you're getting out.
Yeah.
I guess both in recruiting and also for people, the rest of us, to know that part of what to think about part of what you really do.
Yeah, when you think about the state police, you think about people that are dressed like I am, that are patrolling the highways in a blue and gray car with blue lights on the top, and that's not what we're all about today. Really never has been what we're all about, but
Right.
We're about community policing and interacting with our communities. Since the Ferguson incident, there have been a lot of folks that have wanted to exercise their First Amendment rights in Virginia and talk about what's going on in society. And we found ourselves working with those groups and helping them to exercise their First Amendment rights. Back last summer, the NAACP marched from Alabama all the way to Washington. Highway Patrol, state police organizations through that whole 800-plus mile route were with those groups and help facilitate that. We do everything that any police agency does: criminal investigations, drug investigations, et cetera, and so forth. So we're more than just a uniform. We are people who care about the people that we serve and work very hard to work with our communities.
If someone goes on your website, as I have, and probably a lot of our viewers have, we'll give them that address. It's a very simple address to find. They'll see a whole list of things along the left side of that main page, from starting with an Amber Alert and going right down to things that you all are involved with, but also thinking about something that's not necessarily your ongoing task and responsibilities. We're coming up on the 15th anniversary, 9/11, and that's got to be etched kind of in all of our memories, but also something that affects law enforcement at all levels.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 15 years. I was at the Pentagon on 9/11. I was a major in our Bureau of Field Operations and was dispatched there as soon as the attacks happened, and it's something that certainly is etched in my mind. But as a result of 9/11, the state police job changed a great deal. We became involved in the fight against terrorism, if you will.
Right.
Rather immediately after 9/11, the Virginia Fusion Center was established. Then Governor Warner helped us get funding in order to build it. As we were building a new headquarters, the Fusion Center became part of that new headquarters. It's a multi-agency intelligence facility built to top secret standards, and we have the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Virginia Fire Programs, Department of Emergency Management, State Police, Corrections, and others that have a presence there, and 24-hour operation to protect you and I, and it's all hazards. So irregardless of whether it's fires on the Eastern Shore or a terrorist plot somewhere in the state, they're involved.
Getting some signals that our time may be almost over. Before it ends, though, speak some about body cameras, because that's a hot issue, I think.
Well, it is. We're very happy about the fact that a state contract for body cameras was just established, I believe, last Thursday. The governor put a commission together to look at body cameras. It was people from across the society, and law enforcement was included there at the table. We found no one is against body cameras.
Yes.
The challenge is not necessarily buying the cameras, but storage, managing the data. You look at state police, we anticipate that once we're able to go across the agency, that we'll probably accumulate 1,800 hours of camera video a day. And that's a lot of storage and a lot of management. But we plan to get involved pretty soon now that the contracts are let. We want to do a pilot program, work out the issues with storage, et cetera, and also work out the the challenge of management and so on and so forth, who gets them and what the policies are.
Colonel Steve Flaherty, we want to thank you so much for being on This Week in Richmond and appreciate what you do, who you are, and thank you for your leadership.
My pleasure, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.